Good evening, folks, and welcome back to Real Chris Wyatt. This is Colonel Chris Wyatt, retired 36 and a half years, U.S. Army, 34 in active duty, 23 overseas, multiple combat tours, a dozen overseas tours. Thanks for joining me once again for tonight's broadcast, live reaction and commentary for this debate between Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald John Trump. It should be entertaining, to say the least. This is a must-win for both candidates. For Harris, she's going to have to prove that she's more than just an automaton, cackles, laughing clown car show. And if she does that, that's all she's going to have to do tonight to be a success. They'll call it a rousing victory for her. All the fake media will do that. And for Donald Trump, he's going to have to knock it out of the park. He's going to have to avoid attacking her personally, and she'll try to draw him into that. I'm sure the moderators will also do the same, and hopefully they can avoid that. My apologies if you're having a little trouble connecting to the broadcast. YouTube is doing its usual nonsense for an ultra-low latency broadcast. It's supposed to be 3 to 4 seconds. Once again, 31 seconds. This is happening on all my channels now. I don't know if it's a YouTube thing or if they're censoring my channel intentionally, but it leads to a delay. So I wait 31 seconds before I go live, and then I go live. What I intend to do is put them up on the screen. I'll provide live commentary and reaction as we go along. I'm sure that the fact checkers, that's the leftists who busy themselves disputing what politicians say, the fact checkers will be busy at the New York Times. I have that up. But let's take a look at the electoral map before we get started here. We got a couple of minutes, and I'm going to show you. Let's just go ahead and work through this. Nobody's chatting right now, but you're welcome to stay around. I'm going to go through the electoral map, and we're going to talk about the different states. Now, hopefully this won't flicker real quick because the software crashed. It did. That's what I expected. Anyway, let's go through it, and we'll pick our interactive electoral map. Let's start with the Democrats. California will go, of course, most likely for, oh, that's not right. It should be, there we go, for Kamala Harris. She should get it solid. Oregon will go solid for Harris. That's 62. Washington will go solid for Harris. She wins the West Coast and already is off to the races with 74 electoral votes, regardless of what she does in life. She will then get Massachusetts, guaranteed. That takes her to 85. She will get Connecticut. That takes her 92. Rhode Island will take her to 96. New York will take her over 100. She has 124 at this stage. New Jersey, she's likely to get. We'll come back to New Jersey a little bit later on. Maryland is a dead giveaway. That's going to go for her, as is Delaware. All Democratic, leftist states. She's now almost she's halfway to where she needs to be, over halfway. So what happens next? She gets Illinois, hands down, piece of cake. Then Minnesota, 10 there. Takes her to 180. Things start to get a little more complicated for her at this stage, but not impossible. So what states are left that she will get? Well, let's switch over to what is going to go for Donald Trump for certain. Texas is Trump. That's 40. Huge, almost as much as California. Florida goes for Trump. That's 74. From there, we go to Oklahoma. That'll be Trump. We go to Kansas. That'll be Trump. Utah, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska, North Dakota, Iowa, we'll come back to Missouri, Arkansas, Tennessee, North Carolina. That's going to be one that's going to be a little tough there. So we'll go ahead and say Trump now. South Carolina, Trump. Alabama, Trump. Mississippi, Trump. And suddenly Trump is catching up, and Louisiana goes Trump. And he's trailing her by just 4 electoral votes at this stage. So what happens here? Well, folks, at this stage, it gets a little more interesting. Let's go now. We're going to have to make some guesses. Well, there's a couple more here. Sorry. Vermont will go for her. So that puts her at 183. New Hampshire may go either way. Now, the problem with Nebraska and with Maine is that those votes will be split, and this tool doesn't allow you to do that. Alaska will be Trump, and he's almost got her. Hawaii, she goes up again slightly, and she's got 187 to 179. That means there's still, both need about 100 electoral votes. Where are they going to get it from? Well, it gets very complicated here. So let's go right now. Trump takes Nevada. All right. That brings them almost even. She gets Colorado. And now she's ahead again. Trump gets Missouri. And now Trump is just 2 behind. He's yet to catch up to her. Trump gets Ohio. And Trump is suddenly ahead. 212, 197. Right. Let's continue on from here. Hey, Annette Beckett and Bad Papa Band. Welcome to you. Right. So now we're at 212 to 197. And it gets even more interesting. Trump gets West Virginia. Trump is now ahead 216 to 197. So what states are left that are guarantees for her? None of the states left on the map are guarantees for Kamala Harris. They're all toss-up states. And in fact, here's a sure victory for Trump right there. That takes him to 224. Now he is less than 50 electoral votes away. I'm not trying to swing this and say Trump is going to win this thing, but going forward, here's where it gets complicated, okay? So, Virginia. It used to be conservative for over a century. Let's say she gets it. All right, now things are a little tighter, 224 to 210. Maine splits. We'll go and leave that in her category just to give her the advantage right now. All right, that leaves New Hampshire. New Hampshire is a conservative state, but tends to vote chaotically. Let's go with Trump on that one. Let's say he pulls it out, okay? Which would be the only New England state that he would pull out. Now we're down to the toss-up states. 8 states on here, 7 of which are considered to be toss-up states. Well, Indiana is not a toss-up state. That's Trump. So there you go. Now we're down to the 7 states right here, folks. These are the 7 states that will decide the president in 2024, as they did in 2020 and 2016. So, all right, here we go. All right. This is my prediction, all right? Now, we'll see. We can change it around. Arizona goes to Harris, despite everything that's going on. New Mexico goes to Harris. And now she's only 40 votes away. Trump is 41. And you see how tight it gets here now. It comes down to Wisconsin, Michigan, Iowa, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. Iowa goes to Harris. Trump gets Pennsylvania. And now Trump is on the verge of winning. All he needs is 12 more electoral votes. He can get that in Michigan or Wisconsin, or Michigan or Georgia. Let's say he gets Georgia. He's got 274 and Trump wins the election. Even if she gets Wisconsin and she gets Michigan. Trump wins 274 to 261 in the tightest electoral race in the history of the United States. I don't think it's going to be that tight, folks. I don't think it's going to be that tight. I think it's going to be Trump, Michigan, and Trump, Iowa, and Trump, Arizona. That takes Trump to 306 to her 239. And that's my prediction right there for the map. Let's go ahead and save an image of that, and we'll see how accurate that is. That's based on current polling and, analysis of where we're at right now. So that puts Trump at 306 and Harris at 239. Before she came in the race, this was going to be an electoral landslide for Donald Trump, but that's no longer the case. All right, so there you go. Let's get rid of that screen over there. Right, so there you go. That's my prediction, my electoral map. All right, we're getting ready now. We're going to bring you this live. It's just 2 minutes away, and I will be smaller on the screen, and I'll be interacting with you. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate I'm surprised the number of folks who've shown up at this hour. This channel is clearly under attack by YouTube. They've now stolen almost 2,000 subscribers from me since they gave me my channel back last year. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, 2021, 2023, it was in the gulag, and then it came back last year. So I don't want commentators. I have PBS feed. And also have the Fox News feed. Let me get this. Okay. 9 p.m. simulcast. Yeah, this is being shown all over the place, so I'm going to give you comments on this. PBS is going to cover it, as is Fox News. So, and everyone else under the sun is covering this. So I will be giving you the Fox News feed if it comes up here shortly. So this debate is in Philadelphia. 2 hours where I'm sitting. Janet Liddy's in from South Carolina. Welcome, Janet. Anyway, that's my prediction. Trump gets at least 306 electoral college votes. Of course, I predicted Trump would win the last time and was very much disappointed by the outcome. But we know the hijinks that ensued, and one questions whether that was actually the results that turned up. But once again, here is my electoral college map, and you just worked through it with me. So I hope you enjoyed that. Trump 306. Harris 229. The race is decided in Pennsylvania and Georgia, and that's where it winds up. Now, if she takes Arizona, this could get a little trickier, but she'd have to take Arizona and Michigan as well. She takes Arizona and Michigan, that is 26 and results in a 50 swing. So Trump loses 26, that still gives him 280, and she doesn't win the election. Even if she wins Arizona, let's share that real quick. If she wins Arizona and she wins Michigan, she still doesn't win the race. Trump still wins. Look at that. Look at that, folks. She has a harder road to hoe than they're making out. The press is making out as if she's got this race easily. She doesn't. She doesn't. Anyway, there you have it. So, right. We're about ready to go live now here. Let me get this up on the screen. And
of American democracy.
Okay, I don't need to hear that. So can you hear that? Let's see if you can hear that. Yeah, you can hear that too. So we've heard for most part of a year here that democracy at risk is that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. What a bunch of pure nonsense that has been, folks. Absolutely pure nonsense. All right, let me go ahead and get, where is this at? So we're getting ready here for this debate. Should be going live any moment now. Come on, where are you at? Where is my Firefox at? There it is. Okay. All right. Okay, let's go ahead and get started here. 242,000 people watching Fox right now. Wow. And there we go. Okay, there I am. Okay, I don't need these clowns.
In this presidential election, their first face-to-face meeting ever.
A historic race for president upended just weeks ago. President Biden withdrawing.
Okay, we don't need to know that. They're talking about what happened a few weeks ago. We know that. Anyway, I'm not really sure what's going on here. What is that? How did I even get that open? I must have more than one Firefox setting here. That's interesting because I have it closed. Yeah, there we go. That is fascinating. I just found it up here again. So let's see. Yeah, ABC News. All right, so there we go. So presidential debate. This should be historic. Yes, I know I'm on the screen, small and large. Let's get rid of that. And we're waiting for them to come up here. We'll see how this debate goes. There will be closed microphone. It's fascinating because Donald Trump insisted on an open microphone for the first debate with Joe Biden back in July, the debate that the Democrats set up intentionally to get rid of Joe Biden because they knew he wouldn't make it to the finish line. And here we go, live now. So Trump had... What's going on there? Okay, that's not... They keep changing to mess around with me. But Trump insisted on a live mic so that he could talk at any time. And Biden campaign insisted on a closed mic. Trump agreed to the rules. Those are the rules for the debates. Trump agreed to follow those rules the rest of the way along. Then Harris comes along. It wasn't until 5 days prior to this debate that she agreed to finally actually do the debate. So why are we not live? What's going on here? It's now after 9 o'clock. It's 2 minutes after. What is the hold up here? Did she not show up? Maybe she didn't show up. Nope. It's just bullshit ABC talking here. Okay, now they're coming out. Okay, are we going to get started here? Yeah. By the way, this is the biggest height difference in presidential candidates in living memory. She's a shrimp at 5 feet 4 inches. He's 6 feet plus 6'3". About 2 minutes before this thing gets started, actually. So, yeah, David Hernevald, welcome to you. Wow, it's been a while since I've seen you. Thank you for joining us this evening. She's a shrimp at 5 feet 4 inches, and Donald Trump is well over 6 feet, close to 2 meters tall. What a difference here. So they've given her a demi podium, a demi lectern. Should be interesting. But again, back to the closed microphone thing. So Trump agreed to it. Harris refused to accept those rules. And then ABC News ran stories this past week complaining about this. And Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have just walked out. Let's see if they shake hands. They do shake hands. All right, here we go. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. No, immigration. Imagine.
Housing. And the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we've
That's
given
not a tax cut,
time,
that's a grant.
so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes
dear
for their
God.
children. My
Socialism at work.
passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who
My
helped
sister
raise
and I.
us. We call her our second mother.
And
She
me.
was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to startup small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations.
Everyone got a tax
which
cut.
will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit.
With a $2 trillion deficit this year in her budget.
Tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
This is utter nonsense.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement.
Correct.
She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher
Yep.
than
Look
they
at her
were
shaking
just
her
a few
head.
years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics.
Look at
And
her.
also
What a condescending
unions
twat.
are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that she and Biden led into our country.
Yep.
And they're destroying our country.
Yep.
They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies
He's
in
running
the
out of
history
time.
of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going
Oh.
to get to immigration and border
Wow, he
security
cut it
during
8
this
seconds
debate,
short.
But I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy.
Yeah, let's see how she responds.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression.
That's a lie.
Donald
That's
Trump
COVID
left
nonsense.
us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald
Oh,
Trump
yeah, he
left
created the
us
Chi-Com disease.
The worst
Yeah, sure.
attack on our democracy since the Civil War.
The 2020
And
election?
what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know
He
are
just
the
needs to
aspirations
ignore
and
her.
hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired
Gonna tell
playbook.
y'all.
A bunch of lies, grievances, and name calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing.
She's
if
had her
he were
minute. She's
elected
over her
again.
minute.
I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump
20
will give you a
seconds
minute
over.
to respond.
A minute.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This
Look
was
at
a
her.
group of people
What a
that got
condescending
together.
troll.
They came up with
Thankfully,
some
we got both
ideas,
of them
I
on
guess
camera.
Some good, some bad. But it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible.
Yep.
And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic.
Also
But
gave
the
a
only
vaccine.
jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs.
Exactly.
bounced
There you
back,
go.
And it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice
Yep.
President Harris, I'll
Well
let you
said.
respond.
So
Are we getting another question?
Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy.
Then they're liars.
What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit.
Well, so will yours. Giving grants to people to have babies.
Plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where...
Invite a recession, we're in a recession.
And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
It's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors,
they cut his mic off,
think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan.
But I heard
it's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this, because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing...
How would it be higher price than gas? We have produced all our gas here.
Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have, and who's going to have higher prices, is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response, and you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
All of them.
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America.
We've had a trade deficit for 40 years.
You want to talk about
it's not Trump.
Deal with China. What he ended up doing is, under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies.
You must be saying to myself, I can't believe I'm debating this idiot.
American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we
even know what quantum computing is.
Support America's workforce so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did,
that's her minute.
Let's talk about this, with COVID, is
She's
he actually
over.
Thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point.
Explain why he thanked him.
When we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency.
Now the Chinese are responsible. They've been blaming Donald Trump. Now they blame...
They bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. Philosophy. But if she ever got elected,
Nice
she'd
teeth.
change it. And it will be the end of our country.
Yep.
She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look
Look at
at
this.
what
Look at
she's
her.
done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And
Okay, we got it, Don.
Don.
Move on to the top of the
You
topic.
you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
Yep.
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide
It's
what
Virginia.
to do with the
Virginia.
baby.
He got it
In other words,
wrong.
we'll execute
It's
the
Virginia.
baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The
This is
Democrats
not
are
good on his
radical in
part.
that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says
He did say that.
execution after birth. It's execution.
He signed
no
that in
longer
Minnesota.
abortion because the baby is born.
That's right.
Is okay. And that's not okay with me. Hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius
lost.
and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now,
Restore
I
the
believe in
Constitution.
exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government.
Yep.
I did a great
It's
service in
constitutional.
doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born.
Bullshit. New York, you lying sack of
Well,
shit.
as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies. And
See, that's not a
actually
moderator.
surprising.
Who the hell is she?
Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade.
There are no protections
And
of
they
murdered
did
children.
exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal.
That's untrue. Abortion
for
is
a
legal in
doctor
every
or
single
nurse
state.
to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that
That's
means.
a lie.
A survivor of a crime of violation to their body.
She's
does
just
not
lying.
have the right to
And let's
make
see
a
if the
decision
moderator
about what
corrects her.
happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted?
They want to kill babies.
Women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail.
Oh, bullshit. Just making shit up here. Making shit up.
Her husband didn't want that.
Ah, this is what I knew where this was going to go.
13-year-old survivor of incest,
Such total bullshit.
being forced to carry a pregnancy to term.
He just said he had exceptions for that. Look at it. She gets away with this.
When Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law.
Of course you will, because you don't believe the Constitution.
If Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban.
Which is illegal.
In his Project 2025.
It's not his project. Here we go again.
A monitor that would be monitoring your
Oh, this is
pregnancies,
horseshit.
your miscarriages.
What a
I
lie.
think the American
And idiots will
people
believe this shit coming out of her
that
mouth.
Certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about...
No, the right to life, you whack-a-doodle. Shut up.
Vice President
Unbelievable.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban.
It's illegal.
We've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else.
States' rights.
Every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue
was
has
unconstitutional.
torn our country apart, and they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible.
Yep.
The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie.
It is.
And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Yep, where it belongs.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came
Well, I
to your
won't
desk?
have to because, again, two things. Number one, she
It's
said she'll go
unconstitutional.
back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50 and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach.
Yep.
But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got...
Just say it's unconstitutional,
with this
Donald.
whole
That's all you
thing
got to say.
about This whole idea. And how unfair that would have been, part of the reason they lost, to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free. But they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
Okay, they're letting
If
him
I
go a
could
long
just
time.
get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D. And I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get
It's
it.
unconstitutional.
Just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans.
Okay, just say it's unconstitutional.
Student loans.
Jeez.
They taunted young people.
Violates the Constitution, the 10th Amendment of the Constitution. Who prepared him for this debate?
So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. So wonderful. Let's go to Congress. Do it. But the fact is that for years they wanted to get it.
We
out of
got it.
Congress,
We got
out
it.
of
You're
the
wasting
federal
time here.
And we did something
Oh,
that everybody said
geez.
couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion.
He didn't
That is
say
not
that.
happening. It's
He said that
insulting
they
to
want
the
that.
women of
Oh,
America.
here we
And
go.
understand what has been
Condescending little
happening
wench.
Under Donald Trump's abortion bans.
It's not Donald Trump's
Couples
abortion bans.
who pray
Wow.
and dream of
How long are
having
we
a
going to spend on
family
this topic?
are being denied
90-minute
IVF
debate.
treatments.
They're wasting 20 minutes
What
in
is
this bullshit.
happening in our country?
It's not germane to the
Working
presidential
women
election.
who are working one or two jobs.
See, ABC
who can
is
barely
working this.
afford childcare
This
as
is
it
intentional
is,
to
have travel
distort
to
the
another
election.
State, to get on a plane sitting next to strangers, to go and get the health care she needs.
Oh, dear God. There's not a
Barely
single
can
policy
afford
here.
to
It's just
do
telling
it,
fairy
what
tales
you
and
are
stories.
putting her through is
Oh, my God.
unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. And
they agree that they should be allowed to murder children?
This issue
I don't
has
think
been
so.
on the ballot in red and blue states both. The people of America have voted for freedom.
The people of America
To
voted.
respond, another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that.
Trump,
and
let it
everybody
go.
else
This
knows
is
it.
wasting time.
I've been a leader on fertilization, IVF.
She gets away with
And
it.
the other thing,
She wins because they cheat.
You should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you
That's
answer the
problem.
question? Would you
because
veto?
under Roe v. Wade,
Answer the question, would you veto?
you could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the governor, former governor
Of Virginia.
The governor of Virginia said, we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do
That's
with
exactly
the
what he
baby.
said.
Thank you.
We're going to turn now to
Thank you.
immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration.
He's
this
fair.
past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question
they
to you
haven't.
tonight
They're still off the
why
charts.
did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill which I supported.
We don't need a border security bill. We have laws in place now. Enforce them, you shithead.
So we're working there right now, overtime, trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States.
You can do it now. We have laws, you frickin' dingbat doorknob.
In our country, that bill would have put more resources.
No, we have plenty of resources.
Transnational criminal organizations.
Well, stop prosecuting conservatives so you'd have plenty of resources.
To that bill, Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress.
She doesn't
and
know
said,
this.
"Kill the bill." And you know why?
This is a lie.
Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem.
So you try to fix it 3.5 years after you created the problem.
Time where the people of our country actually need a leader who
Well, it ain't you, sweetheart.
solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand.
The only thing you've said in the last 3 years, you whined about your
Someone who would
residents.
prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised.
Kinda like
I'm gonna
you'll talk
ask you
about
to do
abortion
something
when it's not the
unusual,
topic.
And I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch.
You've
You
never
will
watched
see
one.
during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom.
Yeah, that's a lie.
And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and
Is she high?
your desires.
Is she so full of shit her eyes are brown?
Deserve a president who actually puts you first.
Dear
and I
God.
pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents
He
and
didn't do
officers on
that.
the border.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave
Look
my
at this.
rallies.
Look
We
at
have
her.
The biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics.
It's true.
That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. what they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats.
She's laughing. It's true.
They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused.
Oh, so they're fact-checking him
within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is the
people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
but
television.
The people
I'm taking it from the city manager.
Okay, so this is just a whole setup here. It's a whole setup.
The Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme.
Here's the cackles.
I think one of the reasons why in this election I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formally worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain.
All rhinos.
Including the endorsement
all who destroyed our nation.
Vice President Dick Cheney and
another rhino.
Member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has
a treasonous bastard, John Kelly.
States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric,
she's getting a big win here.
The American people are not being addressed. I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people.
Because they're incompetent.
Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban.
Yeah. Look at the face. Disdain for veterans, for those who lost their lives. Harris. Yep.
And you take a guy like Esper. He was no good. I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book. Because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they. But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody.
Yep.
Look at the economy.
This is a good point.
Look at the inflation. They didn't
look at the
fire
border,
any
Mayorkas.
of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history.
Any president.
By far.
Any president in history.
In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president in history by far.
Yep, she did. Yep.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the
actually the
National
largest
Guard.
was
You say
under
things
Biden.
get out of control.
I mean Obama.
No problem using the U.S. military.
Police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many millions of criminals.
Just tell them what you're going to do, Don.
Terrorists.
Come on, man.
Common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers.
We know. We got it, man. Stop harping on it.
States, and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to
Okay.
her to put into
Answer
our
the
country.
question, please.
And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes. But it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything
Don,
done
answer the
like this
question.
at all. They've destroyed the fabric
Answer
of our
the
country.
question.
Millions of people let
come
in.
on.
And all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof, despite their
not South
fraudulent
Africa, true.
statements that they made. Crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse me,
President
the
Harris,
FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud, just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Oh, here we go.
And let's be clear.
This is what they
where
wanted.
each person stands.
This is what
on
they
the
wanted all
issue
along.
Of what is important
She
about
has no
respect
class.
for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So
She
let's
called him a
talk
former
about
vice president.
what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people.
Well, where have you been for 3.5 years?
About the housing shortage, which I have a plan for. Address what we must do to support our small businesses. Address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly,
Where have you been for?
people are
Just
exhausted.
Don, you got to come back and say, where have you been for 3.5 years?
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent.
Yeah.
And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the
Well, she loves to
context in
get
which
extreme.
the election in 2024 is taking
It's
place.
inappropriate.
The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if
That's
he were
not
to
what
enter
they
the White
said.
House again.
That's not what they said.
Understand
And
this
it's
is
all
someone who has
presidents, not just
openly
Trump.
said he would terminate, I'm quoting,
Ah, bullshit. He never said that. Like you've already done. That's not true.
because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people.
Vice President
stop
Harris,
him.
thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
Weaponized, please.
We gotta
This is the
continue.
one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized.
A lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions
That's
changed?
a fair question.
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of the, at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking.
You're a
I
liar!
not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States, and in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act,
Which increased inflation.
opened new leases for fracking.
No, it didn't.
My position
No, it
is
didn't.
that
She's
we
just
have
making
got
this shit up.
to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil.
We're not
We
relying
have
on foreign
had
oil.
The
We're the world's largest oil producer.
increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who
Non-American.
worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values
In
I bring
Canada.
to the importance of home ownership,
Canada.
knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter.
He wasn't
and then
handed
filed
$400 million.
bankruptcy 6 times.
He's
Is a
never
value
filed
that I
personal
bring to
bankruptcy.
my work
She's
to
a
say
liar.
We are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable.
This
My
was a
work
question about
that is
fracking.
about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name calling. The true
You're
measure
calling
of
him
a
names.
leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your
Well, first of all, I
response?
wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars.
That's
Many,
correct.
many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years.
Yep.
Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now,
Whoa!
if you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar? She went out.
Oh, that was good.
She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis.
Yep.
She went out and raised money to get them out of jail.
Yep.
She did things that nobody.
She's shaking her
ever
head.
did
She
of.
did do it.
Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania
dead.
will end on day one. Just to finish, one thing so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before.
Yep.
When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead, we'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out of. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400,
President
500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that
for
we
the
have to get
environment,
to.
as
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
They
Thank
keep
you.
cutting him off, but not her.
Thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar. Remember that.
This is not going to come off well for him.
She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, "Oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet." That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America? They're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world. And crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
Okay. Answer the question, Don.
When are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be
Who
prosecuted?
prepped him for this debate?
Or in
Very
Seattle.
poor.
They went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city.
Shut
of
up or
Seattle.
it's going to be
When
over.
are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask you.
You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
Here we
I was at
go.
the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice
crocodile
president-elect. I
tears.
was also an acting senator. I was there.
Yeah,
And on that day,
I was
the
terrified.
President of the United States incited a violent mob
It's not true.
to attack our nation's capital,
That's not what
to
happened.
desecrate our nation's capital.
You
On that
desecrated
day,
with your presence.
140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died.
No, none
And
died.
understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly
Impeach
that
is a
reason.
political trial. It means
But
bullshit.
this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville,
Oh, here we go.
where there was a mob of people carrying
Ugh.
tiki torches,
Oh, God.
spewing
Tiki torches.
anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side.
Yeah, there were.
Let's
Fine people on
remember
each side.
that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching
didn't
who
say that.
remembers what January 6th was, I say we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand.
There's no place in
For
your campaign for
country,
me.
to
I'm a
stand
patriot.
for
You're
our
an
democracy,
America-hating,
to stand for rule of
white-hating,
law,
Christian-hating piece
and
of
to
feces.
end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath. if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking.
He didn't say that.
Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back.
She's been talking for
Let's
2 minutes
chart
in a 1-minute
course
response.
for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked.
Over and over again.
Ingram, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this. You talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through
stop,
on the southern border? How come
stop.
she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills.
Yeah.
They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed. You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Right. You'll say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically.
That.
You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically.
Yep.
Look,
it's a stupid-ass question.
There's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them
no
Republican.
Judge looked at it.
And said
they
there was
said
no
we didn't have standing. That's the other thing.
Yeah, he's lying.
They said we didn't have standing, a technicality.
That's
Can
right.
you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The president of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter because we have to solve the problem that we have right now.
There you go. This is good.
And the problem
this
that
is
we
good.
have right
good.
now is we have a nation in decline.
This is a good move by Trump.
They have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you.
Yeah, that was a good. That was his first good statement in a while.
He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker, so he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences.
Good.
One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that
not voter suppression
here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that.
He just said it's old history. They're the ones bringing it up.
To have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald
But she's
Trump.
not been to the border.
I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did in fact lose that election.
He stated the facts.
It leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart. Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him.
Yep.
Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world.
And then they blew it up.
Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president, but when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy.
Yep, there it is.
He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
your time is
I
up.
think we're going to do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, that's a good question.
Let's understand how we got here. On October
Donald Trump?
7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis.
No, Americans,
Many of them
international
young people
people
who
too.
were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end.
And you've done nothing to end it.
Immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that.
It's been a year.
Work around the clock, also understanding that we must
11
chart
months.
a course for a two-state solution.
We had a
And
two-state
in that
solution. The Palestinians
solution,
don't want
there
it.
must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself.
No, you
in
won't.
particular, as
They've
it
already
relates
cut off
to-
weapons
as it
to
relates
Israel.
to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel.
You've
But
already
we
cut
must
off
have
weapons to
a two-state
Israel.
solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out
Different
and
question.
prevent the killing of more innocent civilians?
He gets
in
the hard
Gaza?
question. She got the easy one.
President, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was
This is not a very good
under
answer.
Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror. And they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what
Because
they're
of the
doing
oil.
is they're
Because the
spreading
price
that
of oil,
money
that's
around.
why.
Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen.
You should say he had the Abraham Accords. He didn't say how.
And it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so
Actually,
clear.
Putin's rooting for you.
They can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me
She doesn't mention
you are
anyone
a
other than John
disgrace.
Kelly, a retired.
That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on
Vice
national
President
security,
Harris.
including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every
Afghanistan,
nation,
Myanmar, Niger,
last year,
Somalia,
168
Ukraine.
different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in
So they're going to take a commercial break. Isn't that interesting? They're taking a commercial break. Wow. That's interesting. Where's my damn... Hang on. I'm trying to get rid of it here. There it is. All right. So, wow. Okay. Well, let's just run through this. Okay. So where are we at? Trump is not winning this debate. Okay. He's not winning it. He may be doing okay, but he needs to get off this nonsense of endlessly going on about immigrants. Talk about immigrants when it's appropriate. Don't bring it up in every conversation. Also, on the abortion issue, this was clearly a setup. The whole thing was a setup. Donald Trump should have simply said very simple. What the Supreme Court did is restore the Constitution. The 10th Amendment prohibits the federal government from legislating abortion. It's a states' rights issue. It was correctly sent back to the states after 5 decades. That's the bottom line. And as far as his statement that about killing babies out of the womb after 9 months, executing him, in fact, that is, he said they want to do that. He didn't say that was a law in any state. And of course, this arrogant asshat of a commentator corrected him, saying that there's no state in the union that allows that. There have been no fact checks on Kamala Harris for the endless lies and fairy tales she tells. She talks about Donald Trump as divisive, and she's used the term extreme half a dozen times inappropriately. It had nothing to do with the conversation. She said extreme, 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 extreme. So this is just bullshit on her part. She also talks about Donald Trump calling people names, but every time I turn around, she's calling him names. She just said, it's a well-known fact that Donald Trump is weak on national security. Well-known to whom? ISIS destroyed, war ended. Iraq, war ended, withdrawn. Afghanistan, war ended, withdrawn. That's Donald Trump's record. Donald Trump had the Abraham Accords, which brought peace to the Middle East in historic fashion. The Emirates, Sudan, Morocco, many other countries in the Arab world formed diplomatic relationships with Israel. Morocco, for the first time in decades, restored diplomatic relations, started flights with El Al and Air Morocco between Morocco and Israel. Shared defense training. Trade is going on. All under Donald Trump, all pissed down the drain by this ineffectual, corrupt, inept administration. And she just lies. She just lies. She calls him names all the time. Look, her performance has not been very good, but she's getting away with all kinds of things. Now, Trump has not answered the question he's been asked twice. She has not answered the question he's been asked every single time. Every single time she's failed to answer the question. Trump, at least twice, has gone off on some tangent and didn't answer the question. So, yeah. Yeah, well, they've only cut her once, and that's when she got 2.5 minutes for a 1 minute response. It finally jumped in after 2.5 minutes and cut her. They've cut Trump off several times. But to be fair, they have turned his microphone on when he tried to respond. They've done that several times, so I will give them credit for that. But yeah, so it's just ridiculous what's going on here. This is clearly a setup, unbelievable. She won't do another debate after this because she's doing okay. This will be her last debate. No. She said, not name calling after she called him a convicted criminal. She said, he shouldn't be name calling, but, she called him a convicted criminal. Yep. She talked about how her mother bought a home, middle class, when she was a teenager. Well, what she didn't tell you is that wasn't in America, that was in Canada. If her mother bought a home when she was a teenager, it had to be in Canada. Because from the age of 12 to the age of 22, this girl didn't live in America. Her formative years during her puberty and her teenage years and high school graduation and entry into college occurred in Canada, not in the United States. So that was dishonest. That's a lie. She said she talked about him filing bankruptcy 6 times. That's also a lie. Donald Trump has never filed for personal bankruptcy. These are corporations. Corporations file for bankruptcy all the time, not Donald Trump. She said we don't need to be reliant on foreign oil. We've got to stop relying. We're not relying on foreign oil. We are the world's largest oil and the world's largest energy producer. We are not reliant on foreign oil. That's a lie. It's another lie by this woman. Unbelievable. Yep. She keeps calling him a disgrace, and she talks about him calling people names. She's the one calling people names. She's the one doing it, not him. Anyway, I think the funniest line so far has been, it's a well-known fact that Donald Trump is weak on national security. It's a well-known fact that Kamala Harris is a dingbat doorknob, Sonny Jim. That's a well-known fact. Unbelievable. So that's my second page of notes from this so-called debate. She calls him extreme repeatedly, talks about extreme. It's not relevant to the conversation when she does it. It's beyond hilarious to see how poor she is here. We're getting ready to go live back to it now. It's supposed to be a 90-minute debate. It's now 10:07 Eastern Standard Time, which means we have 23 minutes left on this, and we haven't talked about real policy issues. I'll run through a list of policy issues we haven't discussed when we get into it here shortly. It's time to go back now to the broadcast. So hang in there, folks. We'll see what they have to say here as we wrap up this broadcast.
Been the position of the Biden administration that we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much
200
worse
billion given by the
numbers
corrupt
that
regime.
you're getting with your fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more.
Yep.
Because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people.
Yep.
But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled.
No idea what he's saying there.
Very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin. Hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together.
Yep.
That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left.
Yep.
I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him.
Yep.
He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's... Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they
here...
They threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also, as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me.
Biden? Against Biden?
I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here.
Yeah, so should we just keep spending money like we did in Vietnam?
A few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules
under the Biden-Harris regime,
the importance of sovereignty and
under the Biden-Harris regime.
And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself.
You compromised our intelligence?
I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense.
Righteous
defense. And because
defense.
of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams...
Hundreds of thousands of people are dead now.
Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
No.
And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president.
Yeah, because they don't have to pay for it. We do.
Understand the importance.
Which European country has given $250 billion for defense of Ukraine? Not a single one.
What we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv
this is like
with
Vietnam.
his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the
Poland,
800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight, Afghanistan.
Oh, that's it?
Last hour.
That's
I want
it?
you to respond to something you said earlier, and please, I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow quiet, please. He's been sitting in Moscow, much happier than he is right now. But eventually, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't
Courtney,
been
stop
that
being so
threatening.
biased.
But he does have that.
Trump has
Something
been
we don't
very
even
calm.
like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started.
Yep, and look what happened.
3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one.
Well, talk about
When I
disrespect from
went
this fellow.
to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times.
Over 5 times.
The
What is it,
reality
6?
is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because
Ukraine is
you
not our
adore
friend.
strong men instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is Commander-in-Chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen.
Okay,
he
just
got
let it
these
go, Don.
countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying
It's
one
not
of the
gonna hurt
statements
Trump's
you made
numbers,
before,
but it's
if
gonna
you don't
keep her
pay,
from
we're
collapsing.
not going to protect you.
President
Otherwise,
Trump.
we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen
Yeah,
done.
Polish
I
Americans
want to
don't
turn
care
to
about Poland.
Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played
Oh,
out?
if she says she does, she'll win big here.
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to
'Cause
pull
you're an
out
idiot.
of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did.
Trump did it, not
and
you.
as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war.
And Afghan
And
women
as
are
of today, there is
tortured.
not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders.
The Taliban is not a terrorist organization. The Taliban is a
Former
militia,
president, as
a guerrilla
president,
group.
invited them to Camp David because he does not again appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States.
It's to bring people to the table.
Commander-in-Chief with a level of respect.
Well, she doesn't understand this at all.
And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military.
He's not done that.
Fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So, if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed.
Correct.
We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated.
They wanted a photo op
because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal, and in my opinion, the most embarrassing
since Vietnam
in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked
Yep,
Ukraine.
exactly
because
right.
They saw how incompetent
Yep.
she and her boss are.
Yep.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country.
Oh, dear
Mr.
God.
President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black.
He was being
and now she
sarcastic.
wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is.
They raised the question.
You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words, so I'm asking.
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think it's, I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's
not even telling the truth here. The black journalists are the ones that brought it up, not Donald Trump.
Land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families.
That's a lie.
Let's remember, this is
He
the
built
same
low-income housing for black
who
Americans
took out
in
a full
New
page
York.
ad in the New York Times,
Yes, he did.
calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino boys who were innocent. The Central Park.
Everyone thought they were guilty. The court of public opinion, they were found guilty in a trial. The trial was fixed and corrupt. Donald Trump didn't know that. He didn't call for their conviction because they're black. He called for the conviction because of the barbaric, sadistic attack on a young woman, which the police and the prosecutor portrayed to the public. This is bullshit. This is a lie by a race-hustling piece of slime known as Kamala Harris.
We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor.
No, you don't. You hate white Americans.
A leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other.
Like you and Biden do.
I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people.
Only if
Knowing
they
that
are minorities.
regardless of people's color or the language.
No,
their
it's not
grandmother
regardless.
speaks, we
Your
all
policies are
have the
anti-white,
same dreams
anti-Christian.
and aspirations, and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
That's exactly what you people are.
Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your third time.
This is the most divisive presidency
Since Obama.
in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park Five, they admitted,
Exactly.
they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world.
Okay,
and
let
I'm
it
gonna
go,
build
Don.
again.
Let's get to the next
It's gonna
question.
be bigger, better, and stronger.
Supposed to be over in 5 minutes.
But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible
we got
economy
it.
because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up.
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country. One who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism.
Hope and change.
About what we can do instead of
Optimism
always
doesn't
disparaging
make us wealthy
the
and healthy.
American people. I believe in what we can do
No, you
to
don't.
strengthen our small businesses, which is why
You don't care
I have
about
a
small
plan. Let's
businesses.
talk
You have no
about
experience
our
in small
plans.
business.
And
What plan?
And let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction.
Of my money.
To pursue their ambitions, their innovation.
At
their
my
ideas,
expense.
Their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your
To knock out
childhood,
babies.
to help you
At
in
my
the
expense.
most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment
Another
assistance
giveaway
for
from my
first-time
pocket.
home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling.
Which is what you've done to Trump the entire
Turn
time.
the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President
Let's turn
Trump,
back
we
to
have
policy.
to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy,
She has
please.
a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move
to
on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay. Thank
That's
you, Mr.
what her
President.
plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond
President
because
Trump,
the
President
former
Trump.
president has said
No, I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to
No,
respond to.
I'm sorry. We're
I
gonna
just need to
move on.
respond
Vice
to what he has
President
said
Trump, this
multiple
is
times.
She
now
won't
your
shut up
third
now.
time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known
Yeah.
as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it. But remember this, I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We
Well,
read
the
about the
duds,
bad ones.
too.
We had some real bad ones, too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? and I saved it. I did the right thing, but it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not too distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private health care options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times.
Yeah.
I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain,
Not great.
who you have disparaged
Because he deserved
as
it.
being
McCain attacked
you don't
him.
like him, you said at the time, because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late great
Was
John
not a
McCain,
hero.
I will never
Was
forget
not great.
that night. Walked onto
Betrayed
the
our
Senate
nation
floor
his
and
last
said,
decade of his life.
No, you don't. No, you don't. No, you
And he
don't.
betrayed
get rid of
Americans.
The Affordable Care Act. You
It's
have
not
no
affordable.
Plan.
It's
And
unaffordable.
what the Affordable Care Act has done is
It's destroy
eliminated
health
the
care.
ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions.
And bankrupted the rest of us.
Watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president and we over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people.
Why couldn't they do that
Donald Trump
before?
said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug
And
prices.
Congress,
He never did.
because Congress undermined him.
Cap the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've
And
been
who's
vice
paying for
president,
that?
We have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors.
And
at
who's paying for that?
$7 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just
No.
a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it.
Vice
Pass as
President
prologue
Harris.
Not get rid
in
of it.
terms of where Donald
Get rid
Trump
of it.
stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a
She
lot
made a
of...
mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years.
Yep.
But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to give.
President
People
Trump-
are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation.
I'm waiting 5 months for a freaking
There's
MRI.
another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's
Yeah, who
climate
cares?
change.
Oh,
President
good
Trump,
God.
with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well,
1
the
minute.
former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up.
That's
ask
what you get for
anybody who
moving into a
has
hurricane
been,
alley.
The victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America
How?
care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as Vice President over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been Vice President.
You have it.
We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of
Time's
the United
up.
Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also knows
You can have that.
building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen
123.
under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This
Time's
is
up,
a
Trump.
crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News president.
It's not historic. It's all the fixes in, folks. The fix is in. There's nothing historic here. It's all the fixes in. So, yeah, so that was entertaining. We are at 10:36, so they managed to get through. It was 24 after, so we went 12 minutes beyond where I said that we're almost out of time here. They got to the climate change thing. Look, okay, so the needle hasn't moved from here. Trump spent way too much time harping on illegal immigrants when other topics were up. Kamala Harris did all the things she claimed that she wouldn't do, and she criticized Trump for doing. She said we need to be respectful, and, you know, all he does is call people names, and that's all she did. She used the word extreme several times, inappropriately, unrelated to the conversation going on at the time. And, you know, it's she called him all kinds of names, as I've already explained throughout this. She has won the debate from a standpoint that she was able to string sentences together. She kept saying, and this is what will resonate with people, I have a plan, I have a plan, I have a plan. Well, her plan is to give away my money, your money. I have a plan to give small businesses $50,000 tax credit. Why? Just because they're small businesses? Businesses get investment because they have good ideas or they have good products and people take a risk. It's not the role of government to favor small businesses and give them my tax dollars so they can fail because they have bad ideas. That's stupid. That's dumb beyond belief. I have a plan to give families $6,000 to knock out, children, which of course go to criminal alien invaders, of course. Why would you give people $6,000 tax credit to have children? That's ridiculous. That doesn't help families. So you're incentivizing people to reproduce, not to be productive. That's ridiculous. Kindergarten has failed in Germany epically. And much of the money goes to criminal alien invaders, not to Germans. The idea was for Germans to have births. The idea was for Japanese to have births. The idea is for Americans to have births. They're not having births because people lost hope in this country. And because we have this nonsense going on with selfish generations of adults who refuse to reproduce because they're arrogant asshats. Yeah, so anyway, it's she's like, this is the funniest line tonight I heard. We won't take guns away. Tim Waltz and I both have guns. You think I trust Tim Waltz? As a guy who lies all the time, a man who is reckless and has no good judgment as an adult in his late 20s, early 30s, drove 95 miles an hour in a 55 zone and then lied to a state trooper claiming that he was deaf. He couldn't hear. Yet he was serving the Nebraska National Guard and then continued to serve in the Minnesota National Guard for another decade until his cowardice led him to resign and lie to the public, claiming he had to resign in order to run for Congress. In fact, that's a lie. He didn't have to resign. He's in the reserve component. In the reserve component, you can run for political office and serve. It's active duty that can't do that. Little Timmy Waltz and Kamala Harris have zero credibility, but this will not move the needle at all. What it will do is keep her from sinking any further. So this will keep her from sinking any further in the polls. Trump will not gain anything from this tonight. It's as simple as that. The commentators have been incredibly biased. Whoever's controlling the microphone has been very fair, however. They've overruled the moderators repeatedly, which I thought was great, both in Kamala Harris's favor and in Donald Trump's favor. It was very balanced how they allowed them to get away with speaking when it wasn't their turn. So, yeah, I got to say that. But these two, especially the female, an arrogant asshat, rude and disrespectful. She talks about civility and not calling people names when you get past that. Yet she called Donald Trump a criminal, and she knows very full well that these were all trumped up, bogus charges, and none of them are legitimate in any of these cases, and weaponized the Department of Injustice. So, they're showing commercials right now. We're probably going to end this. I'll see how long they get for their closing statements, and I suspect she'll get to go last. But she's just going to tell fairy tales again. Look, Trump did not have a great debate. I don't know who prepared him for this. When it came to the abortion issue, this is all you say. I should have been on that stage. The issue with Roe versus Wade is it was unconstitutional. The federal government, through an activist court, violated the Constitution. The very role that the Supreme Court exists for is to validate the Constitution, ensure that laws passed comply with the Constitution. Roe versus Wade is a decision that violated the tenets of the Constitution. The 10th Amendment expressly prohibits anything not enumerated in the Constitution or prohibited to the states by the Constitution to be left to the states and the people respectively. And Roe versus Wade violated that. What Trump should have said is that we have restored the Constitution and the states must decide this issue for themselves, which is what they've been doing. Also, she lied and said abortion is banned in all these places. It's not. Abortion is legal in every single state in the country, despite the lies of Kamala Harris. That is not the truth. It is not banned in any state. She's a liar. And, whatever. That's hardly a surprise, folks. Hardly a surprise. All right, we're back now for the final comments.
David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Yeah.
Welcome back tonight. The time has come for closing statements, and Vice President Harris, we begin with you.
Oh, good. Trump gets to go last.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward.
That's actually not true. He's focused on the future.
But we're not going
You
back.
keep bringing up the past.
And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living.
Which you caused to go up.
In what we can do together. That is about sustaining America's standing in the world,
which has
and
collapsed under your
we
regime.
Have the respect that we so rightly deserve,
which we lost.
Including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own
destroying
body
free
and
speech.
not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA,
with your
I
legs
was an
in the
attorney
air.
general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them,
what you
are
can
you
do
okay?
for her.
And
What
that's
you can
the
do for
kind
her.
of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first.
Putting themselves
I
first, a man
intend
who
to be a
took no
president
salary.
for
You're
all
taking a salary.
Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President
2
Trump.
minutes. Well done.
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things.
She didn't say anything.
Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it, and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question.
Are you better off?
Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan.
That's not
what
accurate.
These people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President
Oh,
Trump,
2 minutes,
thank you.
perfect.
And that is our ABC News
There you go.
presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News. Good night.
Yeah, good night and good riddance. Okay, so again, as I said, it didn't move the needle. Didn't move the needle at all. That's the wrap. That is the presidential debate. I doubt that Harris will do another one because she did what she had to do. She pretty much avoided the word salad. She never once explained her plan. The only time she kept saying, I have a plan, I have a plan, I have a plan, I have a plan, I have a plan. The only plan she had is she's going to give your money away. She didn't talk about her tax increases. She talked about tax cuts. But the tax cuts aren't tax cuts. Grants are not a tax cut. Thank you for the super chat, Courtney. It's our favorite postal worker right there. Billy Brown was her client too. Yes, he was. No, she didn't say anything. Look, Trump wasn't great. They will say that Harris won the debate. I will say she won it from a standpoint that she didn't implode, which is what a lot of people thought she would do. But again, we are 51 days now since she was selected, not elected. Trump didn't focus on that. He did mention briefly how the election was stolen, but the wording, the logic has got to be done in a more smooth, a better fashion than Donald Trump did it. And it's unfortunate that he didn't say it better. As in the abortion issue, which they allowed to drone on for almost 16 minutes about abortion, which isn't even relevant in this race. It has nothing to do with it. First off, Donald Trump's verbiage was wrong. He talked about Biden could sign a bill right now. She could sign a bill. No, they can't sign a bill. There's no bill for them. They can sign an executive order to get something done. That's not, what needs to be said. But, she was, neither one was particularly good. There was very little substance by either one. She talked about being respectful and, getting to the future, not the past. Yet all she did, the entire debate, was talk about Donald Trump and the Central Park 6. She talked about Donald Trump and the Jean Carroll nonsense, claiming she made a false statement about him having been found liable for sexual assault. He wasn't found liable for sexual assault. He was found liable for slandering the woman. That's what the charge was about. That's what happened there. So, just total lies here across the board. Topics that weren't talked about here. She's proud of the fact that they pissed down the drain $1 trillion of our tax dollars, which contributed immensely to our deficit on this green energy bullshit. She was sassy. The never one discussion here about her position on the First Amendment and her calls for censorship. She called for censoring the president when he was president, when she was a senator. She and her administration and the Biden regime have been censoring Americans through their collusion with tech companies like YouTube and Twitter and Facebook. And even Zuckerberg has admitted the criminal activities of the Biden regime and the Department of Homeland Security, the Federal Bureau of Incompetence, and the National Institutes for Health, as well as the White House, censoring Americans or forcing or threatening tech companies to censor Americans. And of course, Facebook complied because they're also a criminal racketeering enterprise. She was selected, not elected. That was the phrase that Donald Trump should have used. He didn't use it. That's unfortunate. The question of Afghanistan came up, but it was handled very poorly by both Trump and the moderators. What should have been handled, what should have been said there, Trump talked about it, but his delivery was not good. There was not a single mention of the federal deficit, $2 trillion under this corrupt regime. Trump missed a golden opportunity for that. Of course, she would have come back and said there were deficit, but that's a record annual deficit never achieved before. She's going to say that if it did come up that Trump had a $2.4 trillion deficit, but that is not what the budget deficit was. That was the total deficit spending for the year because of COVID, which wasn't part of the budget. There was no real serious discussion about her role as a border czar and her failures there. Yeah, he said Biden was thrown out like a dog, but that's not what should have been said. I'm telling you, the phrase that works is selected, not elected. Kamala Harris was not voted on by voters. She's never won any primary. And we have the danger that this lunatic could actually become the president of the United States without ever having been voted in a primary election, never been tested in a primary. She was such a poor candidate in 2020 that she got 0 votes and was out of the election just like that. We cannot forget that. On Israel and Gaza, neither one of them response was very good. Hers was atrocious on Israel and Gaza. The most comical line of the night is that Donald Trump, it's well-known fact that Donald Trump is weak on national security. It's not a fact. That's an opinion. And it's an opinion that only Kamala Harris and Joe Biden share. No one else on the planet shares that opinion. Yeah, they kept cutting Trump off. The female kept cutting him off. She got cut off once, maybe twice. He was cut off several times, even though he hadn't exceeded his time limit. She said, let's not do name calling after she called him a criminal, a convicted criminal. She said that her mother bought a home. She knows what it's like to be middle class because her mother bought a home when she was a teenager. What she doesn't tell you, because she's a lying sack of horse manure, is that Kamala Harris did not reside in the United States when she was a teenager. Her entire years as a teenager were in the People's Republic of Canada. From the age of 12 to the age of 22, Kamala Harris lived in Canada, not in the United States. Also remember the fact that neither one of her parents were American citizens at the time of her birth. She was an anchor baby to her Jamaican and Indian parents. Yep. Also, the worst part of the night was when the moderators attacked Donald Trump over the question of her ethnicity. And I said this would be a trap for Donald Trump, and he handled it poorly. He started out saying, well, but what he should have said is that I don't care what her ethnicity is. I didn't raise that topic. And when they would have confronted him and said, but you did, he would have said, no, I didn't. I was invited to the Black Journalists Convention. I went there, and they brought that up. They brought the topic up. I said, that's not me. I didn't raise that topic. You never heard me raise that on the campaign anywhere. See, Donald Trump made a huge mistake there. He's 77 years old, and maybe he's slipping a little bit. But I'll tell you this, that was a huge mistake. That's what he should have said. They're the ones, Democrats. And the Democrats who are journalists are the ones who raised that issue to try to trap me. And I just said, I don't know. One time she says this, one time she says he's that. That's true. But he should have said the black journalists are the ones brought up, not me. Because that's what happened. So Courtney goes on about, I think that Trump's vulgar and crass, but I think he would make a better president, Kamala. Well, I don't see anything he said that was vulgar or crass tonight, whereas there were very crass things that Kamala Harris had. And I loved how they kept the camera on both of them early on because you could see her condescending, arrogant, holier-than-thou attitude that she had. It was actually entertaining to see that. She kept calling Donald Trump a disgrace, yet she's talking about we should be civil and not call people names. Now, Trump never said you got to be civil and not people call names. He said she's the worst vice president in history, and he stuck to that the whole time. So she also said that, we have to do things so we're not relying on foreign oil. Hello, sweetheart. We're not relying on foreign oil. We haven't been. Now, somebody came in earlier and tried to correct me and said we need sour crude. Well, we have sour crude. What you want us to get the Venezuela garbage? That stuff is like frickin' syrup. We have refineries in Texas that are well suited to handle the low quality crude oil coming out of the oil sands in Alberta. But unfortunately, it's prohibitively expensive to get it there because of the criminal regime of Obama carried on by Biden in dismantling and preventing the completion of the Keystone XL pipeline, a pipeline that would have brought millions of barrels of that crude, mostly through gravity flow, down through the prairie to the Gulf states of Texas and Louisiana in refineries that are well suited to handle that poor quality crude. Yeah, so that's where that oil should be coming from North America, inside the U.S., Mexico, Canada-Mexico trade agreement, not coming from overseas. Now, we're not relying on foreign oil. We're the world's largest energy producer and largest exporter. The female moderator did not like Trump at all. She came across as disdainful. Yes, she did, Charles. She was arrogant, too. Trump has U.S. best interest at heart. Yeah, she kept talking about, she lied in the beginning about Trump's tax cuts for billionaires. That's a lie. That's a lie. It's well documented that the average American family got a larger percentage tax return than the wealthy did in America, and that all Americans received a tax break, not just the wealthy, not just billionaires. And oh, by the way, what's our problem with billionaires getting a tax break? The billionaires are overtaxed. They're taxed at a higher rate. We have a communist, socialist, illegitimate tax system in which some people are treated better than others. Some people pay 10% income tax. Some people pay 28%. Some people pay 39%. That's immoral. It's absolutely immoral. Whereas with capital gains, everyone who has a capital gain pays a flat 20%. And they want to raise that to 28%. Actually, they want to raise it to 48%. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden want to raise the capital gains tax to 48% for the wealthy and 28% for the rest of us. They will destroy the stock market and our retirement accounts. Elon Musk pays like 50%. No, he doesn't pay 50%. I don't know what he pays. Elon Musk pays 20% capital gains tax like the rest of us. So if he sells his stock, 20% of it. But in 1 year, I think he paid $13 billion in income tax in 1 year. I think that was the story. The most ever paid in total of any American in the history of the Republic was paid in a single year by Elon Musk when he sold when he sold Tesla stock a couple years ago. Yeah, Trump does have the best interest of the country. There was no mention of the fact that he took no salary as president. He returned it to the fiscus. It went back to the government. She lied saying that Donald Trump kept black people out of housing. That's a lie. Donald Trump built low-income housing that no one else would build. Other developers refused to build it. Donald Trump built low-income housing. Just old racial tropes. This whole thing was about trying to draw out Donald Trump as a racist and a convicted criminal. That's what this whole thing was about. It was a setup from the very beginning. But we knew that. Trump has to get major props and credit for actually doing the debate on a hostile network like ABC, owned by Disney, a leftist, hate-wanking, slimy, anti-American, race-hustling piece of shit company. Interest of full disclosure, I own shares in ABC Disney, in Disney that is. Yeah, but I bought the shares when it was just Disney, when it wasn't Disney and ABC and ESPN and all this other stuff. So whether you're wealthy or not wealthy, whenever they decide you're wealthy. Yep. So did she. Jails. What about jails? I didn't catch that. What else? ABC with the whole question about ethnicity, he didn't bring up the fact that it was the black journalist who said that. That would have been honest. So this is the way that question should have been set up. This is the way the question should have been set up by that moderator. Mr. President, at a recent event of the Black Journalists Association in Chicago, you were asked a question when the program started about the ethnicity of Vice President Harris, and you responded by saying you didn't know she was black, you didn't know what she was. And is that your position? How do you respond to that? Why would you address that? Trump should have said, I'm glad you brought that up. I didn't raise the issue. They did. You'll notice it on my campaign. I've never raised that issue. I don't really care what her ethnicity is any more than I care what my ethnicity is. We're not black and white. We're Americans. Boom! That's a home run. That's what should have been done. But it was a setup, so they would never do that. Yep. All right. So her I have a plan. Well, her plan is to give your money away, to give my money away. Yep. To people who are not a good risk. Just like the student loan program. I knew the day that Obama stole the federal student loan program from commercial banks, which for decades had provided service to American students by providing low interest loans, lower than the prime lending rate, to students on generous terms, which allowed for in-school deferrals. If you went back to school, it allowed for military service deferrals. It was a very generous program, and if you defaulted, the federal government, the taxpayer, would pay it back. They would come after you to recoup that. That's how the federal student loan program worked for 50 years. Then the Obama regime, the socialist, communist, hate-wanking, disgusting, vile, repulsive, communist government of Barack Obama and Joe Biden stole the federal student loan program, took it away from the private sector, and then the government loaned the money by borrowing money from the Chinese and printing more money through quantitative easing, devaluing the dollar, burying us in debt, giving it to ungrateful students who then used it to buy iPads and cars and Apple computers and lattes, and then whined about paying back loans because they were so deep in debt and they're morally irresponsible. That's what Obama gave us. And why did he do that? To weaken the dollar, to weaken the economy, to cause the collapse and the entire social re-engineering of America, to destroy the Judeo-Christian Anglo-Saxon basis of this country. The most successful country in the world. They're envious, they're hateful of America because of its Judeo-Christian Anglo-Saxon roots that have made it the most successful country in the history of humankind. For some reason, Democrats and these race haters hate America. Instead of celebrating our genuine uniqueness as a country, they hate us. Capital gains should not have a lower tax rate than labor. Oh, absolutely it should. Absolutely it should, Courtney. Absolutely. Capital gains should be taxed at almost nothing. Capital gains are the reason why there is labor in the first place. If there was an investment from people who took a risk, labor doesn't take a risk, Courtney. You take no risk by going to work for the post office. You have a job. You work there. The only risk you have is your employer goes out of business. But it doesn't go out of business if tax policies are sound and if the business climate is good. But people who put capital into creating jobs, into creating businesses, take a risk that they'll never get anything back. And we can only deduct $3,000 a year in losses. You can only deduct $3,000 a year in stock losses, a figure that's been the same for now. $3,000 is nothing now. We should be able to deduct $20,000 a year at a minimum in stock losses to make up for the inflation. That 30 years ago, that $3,000 is a joke. It's a joke. It's a scam. So Americans who invest have no possibility of recouping their losses through a tax deduction or mitigating their losses. Those who commit capital to invest in businesses, to fund them, taking a risk to fund NVIDIA, to take a risk to fund real networks, to take a risk to fund Microsoft, to take a risk to fund Google and Meta back in the day, those people are the ones who create the labor. They should not be taxed on that. That's ridiculous. They should be taxed on their income. And a capital gain is a return on investment for something you took a risk on. No, labor should also be taxed at a very minimal rate. Income should be taxed at 10% max. What's this? Who are you talking about, Nicholas? About mom. There's a poll out there already who won the debate. Trump, Harris, ABC. I haven't seen that. I don't know that Trump won this debate. I think Harris held her own, given the circumstances. ABC definitely came in third. Yeah, I'm thinking ABC, says Charles. Yeah, the questions were loaded. Yep. Cackles made blatant, outrageous remarks which are inherently lies. Yeah, no, it was unbelievable. Now, but look, conservatives are going to say that Trump did amazing. He was incredible. The left is going to say, the media is going to say that Kamala Harris was incredible. She held her own. She was very presidential. Neither one of those statements are true. Both of them had average performances. It's just that people expected so little of her that hers was great because there was so little expected of her. But yeah, that's the bottom line with that. Anyway, so earlier today, for those of you who weren't here, I was very uncomfortable. Arbot was very uncomfortable about what? Not one single fact check. Yeah, no, exactly. So they interrupted, both of the moderators corrected Donald Trump, claiming that he misspoke or he lied, but they never once corrected her in anything. Yeah, both of them ran over their time repeatedly, and I will say this: props to whoever controlled the microphone. They did override the moderators and let Trump and Harris speak when they wanted to have a rebuttal. That was brilliant. Although the first rebuttal went back and forth like 6 different times, it was ridiculous. Many people give too much credit to the power of the president. The state legislation and governors have much more power than people realize. Well, they don't, Courtney. They don't. We have a Department of Education that illegally imposes requirements on states. We have a federal government that, through the Department of Transportation, illegally imposes requirements on states by funding highways, bridges, and roads. We have a federal government that imposes requirements on local communities through the military. Yep. We have lots of things that the federal government imposes itself on local governments. But you're right. State governments should have more power, but people don't pay attention to that. So this is what I shared earlier. This is what I came down with on where I believe the race will be. So here you go. This is my electoral map, and I've set it up. California, the West Coast goes to Harris because those people are demented. Colorado and New Mexico go to her in the Plain States, then in the Southwest, and then Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, the leftist blue belt of Scandinavians and Germans who've betrayed conservatism. Then in New England, almost everything in New England and New York goes for, and the Mid-Atlantic goes for Harris. And then this deep South and the Midwest goes strongly for Trump. As a consequence, Trump gets 306 electoral votes. Harris gets 229. Let's play devil's advocate and say that she actually wins in Arizona, which is a possibility, okay? And that she wins in Iowa. She still doesn't win. Trump has 289. Let's say Trump wins Iowa. She wins Arizona. And then she wins Illinois. I'm sorry, that's the wrong way. Not Illinois. Then she wins, which one that she might win? Pennsylvania. Well, if Harris wins Arizona and Pennsylvania, Trump still wins on my map. Look at that. Trump can afford to lose Pennsylvania and Arizona and still win the election if he wins Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana. Look at that. Yeah, she's got Hawaii. Yeah, I gave her Hawaii. Yeah. So look at that. He still wins with 276. And then he could actually lose Iowa and still win the election. Look at that. Trump could win 270 to 265, losing Arizona, Iowa, and losing Pennsylvania. Look at that, folks. That could be the election night right there. 270 to 265. Wouldn't that be something? But that's not how I see it happening. I see Trump winning Iowa, Pennsylvania, and Arizona, and that takes him to 306. There you go. There you go. So we'll play around with that map a lot more as we get closer to the election, but we're just a number of days away. This won't move the needle at all. I don't think so tonight. It doesn't move the needle. Yeah, they left it to burn. But it's Hawaii is a multiracial kaleidoscope of chaos. Yep. Hawaii is proof that a multicultural society is not healthy. I don't see her getting Hawaii, not after Biden debacle with volcano story. I don't know, Charles. Let's take a look at polls in Hawaii. Okay, presidential poll in Hawaii. Presidential polls in Hawaii. Okay, polls, not pools. Okay, Hawaii. Presidential polls. I got pools. Polls in Hawaii. Polls, okay? Okay, let's see what they say about Hawaii. And I'll show you the voting history of it too. Okay. Well, these are Biden. They haven't done it since April. What the hell? They haven't done a poll there since April. Here's the problem Trump faced in Hawaii. This is the problem he has in Hawaii. Regardless of the fires, regardless of Tulsi Gabbard. Remember, Tulsi Gabbard was a representative in Congress. She wasn't a senator. So going back to 2000, Hawaii has never been lower than 54% for a Democrat. The closest it came was in 2004. In 2004, Bush got 45%. That's the best. Now, it has trended up from 26 in 2008 to 27 to 30 to 34, but that gap is not going to close enough. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. The last time a Republican won Hawaii was 1984. It was Ronald Reagan. The last time. So, since 1960, that's 64 years ago, Republicans have only won Hawaii twice. 1972 and 1984. That's it. And both times, popular Republicans were running for re-election. Nixon and Reagan. Yeah, so not going to win Hawaii. Not going to happen, man. Just not going to happen. No matter how much people want it to happen, it's not going to happen. Just not going to happen. So people are dropping off here. It must be because it's late. Didn't Reagan lose one state? Yes, in 1984, Reagan lost only one state. It was the home state of his opponent, Walter Mondale, Minnesota. That was it. That was electoral landslide. With Joe Biden in a race that I predicted electoral landslide, that Trump would win 38 to 42 states. Now it's going to be a bit of a squeaker, I think, because they've stolen the nomination from Joe Biden, and I think it's going to be a squeaker, so we'll see what happens there. Anyway, so there's my coverage, which I think is excellent coverage, and especially this post-debate analysis, which Anthony Brian Logan and Officer Tatum and all these other people will get tens of millions of views on YouTube, and I get 100. 400. Actually, I'm surprised I got 400. It's more than I expected here. It's more than I've had in a while. Yep. What else? She's about 18 points ahead. Yep. I reckon we'll see a change there. I don't think so, Charles. Yep. Dukakis, take the cock out. Left with a deuce. That's good. That's good. Yeah. No, she'll get to Hawaii. Yeah. Anyway, so it's Trump's race to lose, in my view. Again, don't pay any attention to the national polls. They don't matter, folks. They don't matter. It doesn't matter if Trump's up 48-46 in the national polls. He was actually behind by 6 points on election night to Hillary Clinton. 4 to 6 points across the country, and he won. It doesn't matter. That isn't what matters. What matters are the states, and that's what it comes down to. The polls that matter are in Arizona, Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia. That's what matters in this race. None of the rest matters. It's all bullshit. Don't fall for it, folks. All bullshit. Trump is not going to win in New Jersey. There was talk about him winning when Biden was still in the race, but that's gone now. No chance he's going to win in New Jersey. Charles is going to bed. Thank you all for staying up with me, those in South Africa especially, which is probably pretty much most people except for Courtney and 1 or 2 other people who are here. Yep. Anyway, popular vote means nothing. It's electoral. Yep. Exactly. And that's where it swings. So that's where Trump needs to put his focus. Going to California is a waste of his time. He will not win in California, even though when Biden was in the race, it was tied 49-49, but that's no longer the case. Charles says, thanks. That was entertaining and enlightening. All right, you guys have a good evening, and I'll be on tomorrow. Tomorrow is Wednesday. It's my busy day. I have an interview I'm doing with somebody at 9 o'clock, which you won't see. That's offline. And then I've got my broadcast. I got the radio program tomorrow night. We'll talk about the debate. All right, folks, thanks. We'll catch you later. God bless and have a lovely evening. I'll probably do a prepared video tomorrow with my comments about this. Norway, what's that? Norway does have long summers and long winters. That's true. All right. It's been a while since. Okay, I'm on the other program, so I got to remember where these markers are. Cheers, everybody. Thanks a lot. God bless and have a good night.